President Biden talking about how he would get a mandate he is considering a mandate for all employees. I
don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power, just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
So that was him saying he doesn't want to make it mandatory. But now, Clay, it looks like the federal government, as of tomorrow, may make it mandatory for employees.
For federal employees, 2 million people.
Federal employees is like Biden's talking about it. I mean, what changed?
There isn't. That's the frustrating thing, I think, to anybody out there that has been actually looking at the data. And I'm encouraged. You mentioned what went on in St. Louis. The people of St. Louis rose up and said, we're not going to allow a mask mandate to occur all over St. Louis County. And I think that's a little complicated. There's a difference between St. Louis City and St. Louis County. But the county stood up and voted 5-2 against the idea of the mayor being able to implement a mask mandate. And I think that's an interesting template for a lot of people out there who want to be active politically as their kids get ready to go back to school. Buck, my kids go back to school next Friday. So 9 days from now, basically, my kids return for another year of school. And last year, we were in person. We were fortunate. My kids go to public school. But the kids had to wear masks all year. And now my county has come out and said it's a parental choice now. And I feel great about that. And my parental choice is going to be my kids aren't going to wear a mask. And I think there are many parents out there, in particular, grandparents as well, that are saying, hey, how do we fight this battle? I think that's one of the biggest questions that's going on in the country right now, to say, look, we can't allow COVID to hijack another year of school.
I mean, force people to force you to put a mask on. We talked about this yesterday. Make people actually say, you have to put on a mask, sir or ma'am, and then look in the eyes and say, why? And if they say it's because management demands it, say, okay, well, can I speak to your manager? Because if you're in a place where there's no local mandate, you should make it very clear to that business, for example, because this is the way the Fauciites are now getting around it. They're trying, they had just the incrementalism of just 2 weeks to get everything they wanted and to lock us down, all this craziness. Now it's, we're not the ones that are trying to force vaccines and force masks on you. It's the private sector, or you don't have to work for the federal government or for your local government. Get another job. So, okay, we need to start actually having pressure in the other direction. We've waited long enough, and people need to take steps themselves.
Yeah, and that's, to me, really where you get into the difficulty of what's taking place here. The federal government, in all aspects, whether it's tech regulation, whether it's COVID, they're deputizing effectively big government and making them state actors to allow these prohibitions to occur. And it's becoming a pretty massive issue of the federal government backdoor mandate through what they're doing with others. Welcome back in. Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We are breaking down the latest as the CDC has now put back in place a mask requirement. And regardless of where we end years from now, it's going to take a very, very long time for public trust to be rebuilt in the scientific community. And partly that's because we've listened to everything that the quote-unquote experts have told us, and then they have been proven wrong time after time. And it makes it really hard to sit back and say, okay, I'm going to follow your advice this time. In fact, just 2 months ago, the White House made a major announcement in mid-May when they said, hey, masks are over. If you are vaccinated, you no longer have to wear a mask. This was Rochelle Walensky, then the director of the CDC, explaining why there was no need for masks any longer because the vaccines worked so well.
It is hard for me to imagine myself, waltzing into the Stop and Shop tomorrow morning and not wearing a mask. I just feel like I'm not wired that way anymore, and it still feels risky.
There's an extraordinary amount of evidence now that demonstrates the vaccines are working in the real world, in cohort studies, in care facilities, in across all states, that these vaccines are working the way they worked in the clinical trials. Importantly, there's also new data, just even in the last 2 weeks, that demonstrates these vaccines are working against the variants that we have circulating here in the United States. And also, data has emerged that has demonstrated that if you are vaccinated, you are less likely, not likely, to asymptomatically shed the virus and give it to others.
You mean data changes over time, Clay? That there can be new data, new facts, new information that can come to light so that shutting down discussion and debate of critical public health issues, having social media do the bidding of one political party by censoring people, that's a bad idea? How many times do we have to learn the same lesson in this process before the people in charge finally have to stop what they are doing, stop shutting down things that they don't like, stop telling us they know things they don't know, pretending that we can't remember what they said 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, pretending that we can't see that they're letting illegal immigrants with no COVID protocols really to speak of. First of all, they generally bring them. I've seen the facilities like the Donna facility in McAllen, Texas, which is vast. I mean, it looks like a small city, and they bring them all together for processing there. And then they'll be released often into a local charity. I mean, Texas just found this out. It was a story in the last 24 hours on Fox that there are illegal immigrants with COVID who are being placed in hotels, all done at the expense of the government processing, bring them in, and then either a charity or the federal government just gives them a bus ticket, whatever it is. How can we pretend to care so much about COVID when they're just basically saying COVID protocols don't count for illegal immigrants, but if you want to come into the U.S. right now from, the U.K., good luck. That's scary. COVID's too much of a threat.
Well, and you can't even go into Canada. I was just talking about that. I was up in Michigan with my family recently, and we could see where my father-in-law lives. Across the Detroit River is Canada. You can't go into Canada. I went down to Mexico in February with my wife. In order to come back into this country as American citizens, we had to take COVID tests. Yet there are people walking across the border. And this is, I think, significant, Buck, because there's a lot of talk right now from the CDC. Oh, we have to get everybody vaccinated because the variants are going to continue, and the Delta variants, the latest, they can be more dangerous than the existing COVID virus. But around the world, vaccination is occurring at an incredibly low level. So if there is a variant of COVID that emerges that is wildly more dangerous than the COVID that exists right now, the odds of it coming from the United States are really pretty minuscule. It's going to come from somewhere else around the world, and we're going to have to deal with that same threat as is. And I think this is important. Like, that threat's not going away for years, no matter how many people get vaccinated.
You also can see the dishonesty in the way they try to frame that issue. And even Fauci himself, I believe, earlier this week said, got to watch out for those unvaccinated people because they're essentially petri dishes for what would be a super COVID variant that could evade all vaccines. So they just keep on turning up the heat with what they'll say, whatever they have to say to continue on with this narrative. And yet somehow it's only the rural areas that I never hear the Biden administration say, why is only about a third of the African-American population of New York City vaccinated? Just right. To take, why is that the case? I'm just wondering, does anyone ever want to? Nope, they won't talk about that. It's Trump supporters. This is a religious belief now. The whole COVID mitigation mantra, Fauciism, people take real meaning from this, the same way they do from climate change. It makes them feel like they're doing something worthwhile. They're smart, they're virtuous, they're good people, and it costs them nothing. It costs society a whole lot. It costs people that don't want to live in that fear a whole lot, but they're happy to sit on the couch, order in delivery, and watch Netflix while they can do their remote work and tweet at you and me about how we don't care if old people die. I mean, that's basically the way this shakes out.
It's become very tribal, and even the focus on quote-unquote Trump voters is misaligned, as you just mentioned, when you look at the data. The reason why red states, which is where I live in the state of Tennessee, why many southern states, the SEC footprint, so to speak, has a more significant number of people who are choosing to be unvaccinated is not exclusively certainly because of Trump voters. It's because we have a large black population. So you are combining a large black population. Most states in the South have a much larger black population than the average of the rest of the country, with a large number of Trump voters as well. And the combination of those two groups is leading to large numbers of unvaccinated people. But a lot of those people, remember, have already had COVID, which is important. And second, we never hear about Biden voters who are choosing not to be vaccinated, even though the black population supported Joe Biden 92-8 or whatever it ended up being in the final tally. And statistically, as the data shows, they are the most likely to be unvaccinated. And no one ever discusses it.
No one ever brings it up. And no one also tells us, what does the end really look like here? I mean, when do we finally get to say question. We're done? You know, we've gone through this with Afghanistan and the drawdown there. And finally, after 20 years, the answer to the question, what does victory look like, have been asked so many times with unsatisfactory answer, or really with effectively no answer, other than just keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing what we're doing. It's a similar dynamic playing out now with the lockdowners, where you just they say, we'll keep going with this for as long as we have to, and we'll keep, raising up the mitigation measures. We'll get ready to do it over the winter. This is something that they've become accustomed to. They like. I mean, one of the things that I find most remarkable is that there'll be people, Clay. I mean, I was walking around today in New York City in Midtown, which is where I live and where our New York studio is, and there are a lot of people masked up. I mean, it's definitely already, now you could say they're doing it by choice. What I find so fascinating is that whenever I try to say no mandates, the pushback is often, what's the big deal? As if any normal human being could say, you know what, I really want to walk around and breathe uncomfortably all day. That's not a big
deal.
For
no reason.
For no reason. I mean, it really does remind me, I mean, I mentioned the show yesterday of, in the Middle Ages, medieval period, people would wear, as a show of their piety, a hair shirt, right? People who were extremely religious would wear, and it would sort of agitate and itch and sometimes even cause them to bleed. For some people, the mask is like a hair shirt now. It's, look at how dedicated I am to Fauci and science.
Right now, fortunately for us, we have enough people vaccinated that you're not going to see a wave or a surge of infections among the vaccinated. It will be a surge of infections among the unvaccinated. It will be an outbreak among the unvaccinated. People not getting vaccinated not only is a bad thing for them, it could actually interfere in a negative way with the rest of the country by generating variants that would elude the vaccines. That's the thing we're concerned about.
Welcome back to the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show, where Mr. Travis and Mr. Sexton are not taking the surge with all due seriousness. And the variance, when you add the parabolas on the data and you do a nonlinear analysis of the droplets, where it comes all together with, I mean, basically, at this point, if you still listen to this guy, Clay, it's, if anyone listens to this guy and takes him at face value, it is an intelligence test that they are failing. This guy is a disaster. He does whatever the Biden administration wants him to do. He never upsets the Democrats. He's always on the right side of the left. And I've had enough of it. I mean, what's okay if people are unvaccinated and they're the only ones that are at risk, which is what they're saying, even though that's apparently not true. Then the vaccinated people need to stop whining about this. I don't want to hear it anymore.
They can do whatever they want and not have to worry about the unvaccinated people. Right? I mean, if that were true, then I don't think you would be bringing back masks. And also, again, you would have taken care of you and your family, and you wouldn't need to obsessively worry. And people say, well, there's still the danger of variants emerging, and I understand that. The variants, if you look at the data, are not coming from America, because comparatively, the ones that are going to spread going forward are going to occur in the countries with minimal vaccination rates, which is much of the world right now.
And the Delta variant was ripping all over India, as we know.
That's
India
right.
had a terrible time with COVID. And just another, there's so many giant lies that have been told by the Democrats, by the Fauciites about COVID the whole time. But just one of the ones that they were pressing so hard last year was that it's Trump's fault. America had the worst response of any country. Right. It's Trump's fault. These people are psychopaths. They lied to you. Other countries, European countries, India, Brazil, had worse COVID deaths and hospitalizations and infection rates. I'm pretty sure that's not because Orange Man bad. So remember that while they're telling you now to just listen to the science.